Hi, my name is Sarah Buckley, and my project is over Amiri Baraka. Amiri Baraka was born as Everett Leroy Jones, later changed to Amiri Baraka in 1971, on October 7, 1934, and died January 9, 2014, due to complications for his surgery. Before he began his writing career, Baraka attended Howard University, majoring in philosophy and religion, and left after receiving his degree. After schooling, Baraka joined the United States Air Force starting in 1954, but was dishonorably discharged in 1957 after someone sent an anonymous letter accusing him of being a communist. After his commanding officer found Soviet writings, he was dishonorably discharged. After the Air Force, Baraka moved to New York, where he married his first wife, Hetty Cohen, and had 2 daughters. During this time, he and his wife founded Totem Press Publishing Company. He later divorced her. In 1966, Baraka married his second wife, Sylvia Robertson, who later changed her name to Mina Baccarat. In 1982, Baraka became a visiting professor at Columbia University until he was hired as a full professor at Rutgers University. Baraka's writing career began in 1961 with his first published piece of poetry called Preface to a 20-volume suicide note, and ended in 2006 with a piece of fiction called Tales of the Out and the Gone. He's best known for his writings having major controversy because of the topics that he chooses to discuss, to write about. For example, he wrote the first piece of poetry that I'm going to discuss in 2002, and there was so much outcry not only from general public but from politicians as well that he lost his job. For his first example of his work, I chose a poem called Somebody Blew Up America, which he wrote in 2002 as a response to 9/11 attacks. He didn't follow the prevailing literary trends at the time. Most writers were discussing the terrorist attacks, and while he does mention the terrorist attacks in the poem, it's put off to the side because he starts talking about who really destroyed America. In the first 2 lines, he points the blame away from the terrorists and puts it on our own homegrown terrorists, which he states clearly in the first 2 lines, calling them the Klan. In the 5th line, you get a firm sense of direction for his hatred as he says, "It wasn't the gonorrhea in costume, the white sheet diseases that have murdered black people, terrorized reason and sanity, most of humanity as the pleases." I interpreted this as him accusing the men who ruled the United States by fear and using murder to manipulate, intimidate, and to make sure that people stayed in their rightful place in society. He goes on by trying to make the point of who really does these things. He says, "They say, who do the saying, who's them paying, who tell the lies, who in disguise, who had the slaves." To me, you really start getting a sense of how personal this has become. It's almost as if he sees every black and white, every black man and every woman as a brother or a sister. And so, he takes every crime committed against them personally. Baraka continues asking who owns things. This continues for a while, but it really struck me when he said, "Who owned the city, who owned the air, who owned the water, who owned your crib, who rob and steal and cheat and murder and lie and make lies the truth." This reiterated my thought of the people who use murder to manipulate and control by using fear and wealth. Further down in his poem, he starts accusing the government of things. He says, who make the credit cards, who get the biggest tax cut, who walked out of the conference against racism, who killed Malcolm and Kennedy and his brother, who killed Dr. King, who would want such a thing? Are they linked to the murder of Lincoln? He starts pointing out famous assassinations, a few of them we don't know the details to, at the government and blaming them for the deaths. So now, not only is it just about white supremacy, it's turned into an argument about government control. Something that proved to me that it was more than just white supremacy was when he said, who put the Jews in the ovens and who helped them do it? Who said America first and okayed the yellow stars? This is the last we hear of the government control aspect of it in his poem. He goes back into white supremacy when he says, who cut off people's hands in Congo? Who invented AIDS? Who put germs in the Indians' blankets? And who thought up the Trail of Tears? He closes by making one final point against white supremacy, finishing with, like the acid of vomit and the fire of hell, who and who and who and who. It is from my standpoint that throughout the entire poem, he tries to show that terrorists aren't to blame for the destruction and turmoil of the country. While they might have destroyed a few buildings and taken a few lives, it doesn't compare to the greedy and murderous hearts that have pointed the country's people against different races. The poem itself doesn't have a certain setting or characters, but it does have a certain tone throughout it. The tone throughout the entire thing is very blunt and it's very irate, which is obviously shown throughout the entire poem. and there's very clear imagery in it, like when he makes the example of men standing in white sheets. For the second example, I decided to do preface to a 20-volume suicide note, which was his first published piece. The poem is about a man in his everyday life. At the beginning, he talks about falling into a rut. He says, "Lately, I've become accustomed to the way the ground opens up and envelops me." To me, this is kind of an example of being trapped in a never-ending routine, like when you go to school at a certain time and you have certain things that you just do every day. It shows that his life is never changing and that it stays along the same path. He continues to feel stuck as he goes into the next stanza, saying, "And now each night I count the stars, and each night I get the same number." It shows that nothing around him is changing, that everything is the same, and that he feels that it's always going to be the same. And you really get a sense of him being hopeless and him feeling that his life isn't going anywhere, and it will never go anywhere. In the final stanza of the poem, you really get a sense of hope when he says, "In the last night I tiptoed up to my daughter's room and hear her talking to someone. When I opened the door, there was no one there, only she on her knees peeking to her own clasped hands." I think this gives a strong sense of hope and changing. So we go from him feeling lonely and helpless and hopeless, like his life is going nowhere, to suddenly a feeling of hope because he sees his daughter praying. The poem isn't set anywhere, but the character is an older man with a daughter. The tone of this poem, up until the last stanza, sounds very depressing and lifeless, and you get a sense that he no longer wishes for this life. Finally, in the last stanza, you get hope that things will change for the better for him and his daughter. I decided to compare Somebody Blew Up America to The Invisible Man. The poem is about the white men and women that destroyed America. The Invisible Man is filled with racial tension as well. In The Invisible Man, the narrator's first job is working at a paint company known for its white paint. And in order to create this paint, they're ordered to add 10 black drops of paint into each 10 black drops of toner into each bucket, which to me symbolizes the white and black relationships in America. As Schmoot puts it, "We think that this paint business demonstrates the necessity of the black contribution to white America. And although America is often thought as white man's country, America would not be America without the contribution of black people." I think this gives us a very clear understanding that although black people are critical to the running of America, America is seen as white man's land because of the fear they've put into people of the past, like he said in the first poem, calling people the Klan and, really trying to reiterate the way that they murdered and cheated and lied and put fear into the people of the country in order to get their way and to control people. I decided to compare Preface to a 20-volume suicide note to The Idea of Order at Key West. This one was really difficult because it was such a unique poem that there was almost nothing that I could compare it to. But I decided to compare it to The Idea of Order at Key West because of the woman in Idea of Order at Key West. Like the little girl in Preface to a 20-volume suicide note gives us the impression of hope and change. The woman in The Idea of Order at Key West brings change and inspiration. The little girl, when the father found her, was sitting on her bed with her hands clasped, and was whispering into her hands like a prayer. And in The Idea of Order at Key West, a woman is standing on a beach singing her song, and the sea is seen as her muse. Well, I feel like the daughter is seen as the father's muse in a way of hope and change in the way he wants to change his life for the better, and the way he wants to make it happen for him and his daughter. What I think makes his writing distinctly American is the dialect he uses in each of his poems. The usage of the word Klan in Somebody Blew Up America, and the fact that he talks about several famous youths' deaths. In Preface to a 20-volume suicide note, the dialect kind of goes out through the entire poem. There's not really something that makes it wholly American, but there's nothing in it that would suggest another language. I see Baraka as a realist writer because he writes about things that have happened in our history and things that could possibly happen. Somebody Blew Up America was based off of the 9/11 attacks, and he discusses how it wasn't the terrorists that destroyed our country, it was other people. And preface to 20-volume suicide note, I feel, goes along with any businessman or father who has a daily routine and whose life isn't necessarily changing for the better. And that is my presentation on Amiri Baraka. Thank you.